Hello, welcome to another episode of Department Talk Bollocks. Widely inaccurate, probably offensive, definitely amateur. To misquote Live and Let Die, there are 3 honkies on your tail. One of them is me, Phil.
I've not had a drink for a couple of days.
And I'm Scott.
Today we are going to be talking about Bond, James Bond. But first, we'd just like to apologise because we are sitting here. Last night, Asylum of the Daleks, the first episode of Doctor Who Series 7, went out, and the podcast we recorded, which was to be released in advance of said episode, hasn't actually gone up yet. So we're really, really sorry.
Yeah, it's because we're slow bastards, basically.
Yeah, nobody got off their fat arse and did anything about it. It's all my fault, and I'm terribly, terribly sorry.
And I have got a fat arse.
So after the last episode, Andrew has done a little bit of research and can enlighten us about this Canadian squirrel called Tufty.
Oh yeah, this Canadian squirrel called Tufty, which is actually British squirrel called Tufty, so that probably put paid to the stupid idea of everyone talking Canadian at some point while I was younger. Well, actually, it was quite a famous little character from the 60s and 70s. It was actually the mascot for the public information films by the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents. And I might add, it did appear in Life on Mars.
Okay. So you are now actually standing here alive and well today, in a small part at least, because of Tufty.
Because of Tufty, yes. Because I didn't get run over.
Right, okay.
When I was younger. by a giant squirrel.
A giant squirrel. And in the next episode, I'll be sharing my anecdotes about Welliphant, the fire service's elephant, who taught me a lot about fire safety.
You're making that stuff up.
You're
making that
up. Not Christopher Reeve teaching you how to cross the road as the cross code, man. So anyway, going past giant furry squirrels.
I just some business. If anybody would like to hurl abuse at us, you can find us on Twitter at Department TV or Dept TB, DEPT TB. And if you'd like to email us, departmenttb@gmail.com. But that's all going to be put on the website with the linky links. But if you've got any contributions, any questions, any show suggestions, we'd very much like to hear from you and find out whether you actually exist.
Yeah, and it's pity we've not got visuals, because I would have loved to have seen people watching Phil just waving his arms like a madman then.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I keep looking at the microphone and it's like I've got this big furry dildo staring at me and I just can't take my eyes off.
That's because I pointed in your direction.
Slightly hypnotic and mesmerising.
Didn't want to get put off by that, you know.
I think we'll start very much like we did with the Doctor Who podcast and find out about our first experiences of bondage. And then we'll talk about James Bond.
Notice how none of us laugh then. I think it's because we did that joke 5 times before.
Yeah. I thought it was a good joke. So Scott, why don't you start us off with your first experience?
It's an unusual change for me to go first.
That's because you didn't do much last time.
Yeah, well, I know nothing about Doctor Who apart from what I actually watched. As for Bond though, my dad used to record him off TV. After he passed away, all we were left was the odd few films they recorded. Man with the Golden Gun was the first Bond that I watched, because I thought I'll watch what my dad used to watch. It, basically become a man, rather than watching the female television that my mum would watch, like soaps and all that kind of mindless crap. Man with the Golden Gun was my first introduction. Scaramanga, Nick Nack, the plane boss, the plane. And I thought, what a brilliant film it was. I know some people dislike it. They think that the villain in it wasn't exactly up to par with some of the others. But regardless, it's an ingrained, rich.
It is. I mean, it's quite an enjoyable film in itself. It's not the best of the films, but it's quite enjoyable.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. It's awful. I cannot fucking stand the Man with the Golden Gun. I absolutely hate it with a fiery passion. I think it's the worst one of all of them.
You don't like Nick Nack.
I just think it's just the franchise at its absolute kind of nadir. Everybody's really tired. It's actually the last one that Harry Saltzman, because it was a partnership of Harry Saltzman and Cubby Broccoli producing. Last one Harry Saltzman did, and it's quite telling, because everything just seems tired. John Barry's score seems really kind of lazy. It's like he's dusted off his cues from You Only Live Twice, and sort of and the script just seems to be like woefully lacking. A lot of silly gadgets. The Sergeant J.W. Pepper, as if he wasn't annoying enough in Live and Let Die, gets brought back in it even more.
It's got Britt Eklund in a bikini.
But Britt Eklund, but then she's just so dumb. She's just like I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There's like she's just annoying.
I just loved how she backs her ass into that lever. That was the best scene in the whole film.
No, I need my Bond women to have a little bit more about them. She might be pleasant on the eye, but that is not enough for me to find a Bond woman sexy.
That's fair enough.
It just doesn't work. And you can tell I'm right. You can tell my theory that because you watch Spy Love Me. And all of a sudden, it's like this creative vigour. It's like we've got to reinvigorate the franchise, and everything's back on top. We've got the introduction of the Lotus. We've got, it's just bigger, better, bolder Bond, and that's because the Man with the Golden Gun's so rubbish.
But to be fairly honest, though, when looking at the books, if you remember Doctor No, obviously everybody knows Sir Andres, Honey Rider, absolutely stunning as she comes out of the ocean. In the book, she looks like she's been beaten with an ugly stick. Her nose is broken. Everything about her basically is she isn't exactly an attractive girl whatsoever.
So she's described on the page.
In the page, basically, as a not a very attractive girl, but Bond nonetheless.
Still not. Well, let's put it this way. I think Man with a Golden Gun. We've got to say Phil hates it. Scott loves it. I like Britt Eklund in a bikini.
Yeah, talking about girls with the ugly stick, though, like in the Bond franchise, I mean, he's quite lucky and he gets presented with rather attractive women. But do we think that if there was, a not so attractive looking, agent that he was paired with or something, do you reckon he'd still do it? I mean, like...
Bond's Bond.
He'll do anything.
So what we're saying is Bond's not discerning. Like if he was down Salford Precinct and that was some chav with like a hair pulled back in a ponytail as tight as it could be, but she was proper up for it, he'd do it. I mean, that's what I was asking. Like, is Bond discerning at all? Like,
but you got to think to yourself basically. If Bond was given a mission, basically, he's got to recover some files, and he's got to
from Salford
Precinct, and he's got to get them from the cashier girl at the secretary at the help desk. Basically, he would go up to do the whole charm suave thing about it. Probably try his hardest not to nail her, but given the option, basically, if he had to for his country, he would do it.
Yes. So he'd shag the girl he works in Wiltshire.
Bond would shag a chav. Yes.
Okay, glad we've established that.
Yes.
Have you got anything to add, Scott, about your
no, I think that keeps it brief, it's easy, and that is just a plain simple story.
With me, it was a little bit different. I was really lucky. I grew up in the 70s, so I got to see some of the Roger Moore stuff quite early on. It was one of those weird things, really, with me, because my mum used to take me to the cinema, and we actually watched quite a lot of the Bond films at the cinema as they came out. More so with the Brosnan films, but yeah, we used to watch them. I think my first ever Bond film that I watched might have been Live and Let Die. I think it was Live and Let Die, because I always remember the fact that all he did for the first part of the film was just raise his eyebrow slightly. It was that initial Roger Moore irk, the raising of the eyebrow, and I just remember that boat chase scene with him raising his eyebrow, and I think that's possibly my earliest memory.
Were you aware of like other Bonds before that, or were you aware that it was sort of a new Bond?
If it was my first one that I watched, it was probably the first time I'd ever seen him, but. Right. Back in the 70s, they used to repeat them all the time. Yeah. So I got to see Roger Moore and Sean Connery's version. Less so with George Lazenby, which I'm not a huge fan of. I like the film, just don't like George Lazenby in the role. But no, I was aware of them even back then. But yeah, Live and Let Die was my first experience, I would say.
It's an unusual one to start off with, especially with the heavy.
Well,
after we watched it with the heavy blaxploitation that we clearly noticed.
Yeah, well, it was like it's quite interesting with all the Roger Moore movies, or with certainly with the early ones up until Moonraker, is they don't seem to be quite confident enough to be Bond movies or to be the movies they were in the 60s, and it's like they kind of add in this other element of so you've got in Moonraker, you've got the Star Wars influence, and with Live and Let Die in the early 70s, it's like a blaxploitation movie, and like take out James Bond and replace him with John Shaft, and it's like and call it Who Do That Voodoo instead of it could be a blaxploitation film. And like there's a scene where he's going, is it from the airport? He arrives in he arrives in America and he's like, New York. Yeah, he arrives in New York.
Caddy limo-y type thing.
Yeah,
the
it's
white,
like,
the white
whoa,
car.
relax, Jim. And then you've got various people who are sort of following his progress to the restaurant, and it's like to the club
in Harlem.
In Harlem, and it's like there's a honky on your tail, and then it's like it's pretty easy to spot. It's like following a cue ball.
Oh man! Well, the thing that I do like about Live and Let Die though is it was one of the earlier films that I saw Yaphet Kotto in.
Yes.
He was a fantastic actor. Saw him in Homicide: Life on the Street. He played the lieutenant in that series, and he's such an amazing character. I think Live and Let Die was his first big break.
Yeah.
And he's just got this fantastic, relaxed voice about him, which is just perfect for a Bond villain.
Yeah.
You know, not too over the top, not too high.
And interestingly, him and like Sammy Davis Jr. He's a black Jew.
Yeah, all right. I didn't know that.
Because we were watching it last night, and I said, I said the same thing. Like, he's a really good actor. He comes across really well in this. So I googled him, and that's a really interesting fact.
And he's got Jane Shagmore in it. Sorry, Seymour. Who at the time, well, maybe not in the 70s, I was a little bit too young, but maybe in the 80s, it was one of the crushes that I had.
That is, I mean, as James Bond's sort of dick moves go, that is one of the ultimate ones. Yeah. How he basically cheats her out of her virginity by
it's that beautiful scene where he's walking up behind her, basically like a predator, basically coming up from behind her, putting his arm around her, and everything was just so seedy and creepy. And then he takes her virginity.
That's the deck of cards so it's the lover's card, and the whole deck's full of the lover's cards. Well, it's written in the cards, darling. As he raises an eyebrow.
And then he flips all them cards that he bought at the shop afterwards, all on the lover's card.
It's like, but it's good, and you need those constant reminders that he is a cold, to quote Judi Dench, he is a cold, calculating bastard. That is James Bond, and we should never forget that. He's not to be admired. So my first introduction to James Bond was, I think it was the terrestrial premiere of Licence to Kill. Right. So I never really,
Was you 15 at the time by any chance?
Sorry?
Was you 15 at the time by any chance?
No, it would have been 2.
No, maybe it wasn't a terrestrial. It was definitely one of the first times it had been shown on television. I remember that much because I remember my dad taping it, and he let me stay up. And then it's that, when films on ITV used to stop for the news at 10.
Yeah.
He was like, right, you've had your lot now. You've got to go to bed. So I had to watch the video the next day.
I like that, basically. I can just envision basically that beautiful moment. Dad lets his son stay up, to watch a man film. Yes. And I just remember my dad with RoboCop.
Right.
And then calling me a crybaby when I ran behind the couch as that guy came out. I'm melting.
See,
I get that beautiful father-son moment. I get RoboCop and shut up, you crybaby.
Well, do you know? It's quite interesting you said that, but I've forgotten Licence to Kill is 15.
Yeah, it's the first Bond film.
I think that's because my dad was quite strict, was quite good with that because I didn't get to watch Batman Returns and Batman till till he felt I was age appropriate. I wasn't quite 15, but I was like until he felt like I could
14 and a half.
Yeah, until he felt I could handle them. I was actually getting up for 17 to be honest, but until he felt I could handle them. But with licensed skill,
was your first porn film at 21?
It's a Bond film, and all of them traditionally had quite low certificates.
Right.
Looking at them on
all the early ones were more family related.
Yeah, so I think that might have been like he just didn't quite know about the sort of the content of it, and perhaps got a bit of a surprise with the pressure chamber sequence where Milton Crest's face explodes into in the chamber. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that was my first exposure. I was aware of GoldenEye, but for some reason it didn't interest me. And then during the summer holidays, I used to spend a lot of time at my grandma and granddad Beeman's, and my granddad Beeman used to record them off the television, like yourself. So I remember them in full screen, with a badly cropped full screen, with ITV commercials and having to press fast forward. And what's quite interesting is ITV used to keep the commercials in pretty much the same place whenever they repeated them. So there's some Bond films that I could probably watch them now and it'd be like there's going to be some adverts coming up soon now.
Usually the black and white little bar.
Black and white bar.
That away.
But do you remember the adverts that were in between? Was Shaken back in there?
No. No. And then when I properly got into James Bond, when I really started embracing it, they did a season, and I watched where I think it was leading up to the terrestrial premiere of Tomorrow Never Dies.
Oh yeah.
I think The World Is Not Enough was coming out of the cinema, and the ITV had bought the terrestrial premiere rights for that, and they did a season. I think it was Double O Heaven or something like that, and it was sponsored by Martini. And I remember trying to record them all, probably screwing up around the middle, and having a bad VHS or something like that. And
too many martinis.
Too many martinis, or perhaps the tape ran out or something like that. And I think I gave up by the end of the season, didn't get as far as Tomorrow Never Dies. But I tried to have a good stab at it to begin with. And so yeah, that was sort of my first intro. And the first one I ever saw at the cinema was actually Die Another Day.
Yeah.
To be fair honest, I've still never seen a Bond at the cinema.
Right. Well, we shall change that with Skyfall.
Yes.
So, favourite Bond films, people?
Well, we can go back to Scott again.
Scott.
Do it in order.
Goldfinger. It's cliched.
No, from now on, I think when you introduce a Bond film, you have to sing it. So you
No.
don't mean Goldfinger, you mean Goldfinger. There you go.
Oh.
Carry on.
Okay, Goldfinger. I think Auric Goldfinger I thought was a fantastic villain. I just liked some of the lines. Sean Connery, even though I think Moore was a better Bond, it was just something about Goldfinger that I really just enjoyed. I can't really explain it. It was just basically, it's one of those ones I can watch over and over and over again, still enjoy from the first time I watched it.
It's also one of the first Bond films that introduced the gadgetry as well, wasn't it? Not so much the small time gadgetry, but the big time gadgetry, like the car with the ejector seat and
the turning license plates,
and the Aston Martin.
This is the first one to be directed by Guy Hamilton.
It is.
The first two were directed by Terence Young. And this is and Guy Hamilton, he just brings more of a comedic eye to the picture.
It was Guy Hamilton who also did Diamonds Are Forever as well,
Forever,
and that was the proper first comedic
film
out of them all. Yeah,
he brings that kind of tone to it. He doesn't. Whereas Terence Young is more into thrillers and you watch Thunderball, and which followed it, and even though there's a lot of gadgets, it's Terence Young back at the helm. And it goes back into that sort of more thriller territory. I think Goldfinger was a really good fit for Guy Hamilton actually, because it sort of plays into his sensibilities as a director. It's a sillier story. Let's be honest, and it's a heist. It's a caper movie, and I think that really suits Guy Hamilton's.
I think another thing about it is basically that the storyline itself, it just fits the traditional style Bond as well. You know, everything about it fits all the marks for what you would normally see or want in a Bond.
Yeah, but I mean that sort of sets it up. I mean, there's never. I mean, prior to that, I mean, in From Russia with Love, there was a little bit of an element with the attaché case, which Major Boothroyd, not called Q at that point.
Major Boothroyd.
Yeah, it gives him with like the coins and the knife, but it's still pretty. It's practical. It's a pretty.
Yeah, but he never used the coins though, did he?
No.
which always got me. that was possibly the biggest question of the time. Why didn't he use those coins?
Maybe there's a
Rushing with Love?
deleted somewhere.
Was it on the cutting room floor where he inserted them into somebody? Yeah.
But it's when you sort of take into Q's lab in Goldfinger and show the car that sort of a legend is born and something which James Bond movies have then kind of had a love-hate relationship with throughout the whole. Sometimes that it's really big. And they use lots of gadgets, and then they dial it back in others because we've gone too far. And it's something that is definitely cinematic Bond nonetheless now, and we can't get away from that.
To be honest with you, Goldfinger's probably iconic to a lot of people. There's a lot of friends of mine who have been big Bond fans who always rate Goldfinger as being their favourite. Yeah. And I think it's because of the iconic status that it's received over the years, including the fantastic theme tune.
Yeah, and you've got
by Shirley Bassey.
And then you've got just sort of, and then the big henchmen. The henchmen. You've got the introduction of. I almost called him Blowjob. Oddjob. You've got the introduction of
the introduction of a blowjob.
Blowjob in the James Bond film. No, the introduction of
probably these days maybe more, but
there's nothing better than a man who can take his hat off and use it like a frisbee.
And then you see. I think it features in so many other spoof parodies or other spy movies. I think Schwarzenegger's The Last Action Hero. There's something very similar to Oddjob, I think.
There's also in Austin Powers the character that's very similar to Blowjob as well.
And then it's something that they try and do again with we get Jaws later on, and it's even in Die Another Day there's someone called Mr. Kill. There's Goldie in Goldie in The World Is Not Enough. It starts another kind of mini little legend, and something else which is always in a Bond film is the henchman, the quiet henchman who doesn't have much to say. Apart from maybe a few pithy lines or something.
Oh, that's what I liked about going back to the man with the golden gun was Nick Nack. Scaramanga actually said to Nick Nack was like good try Nick Nack, because obviously Nick Nack wants all of Scaramanga's possessions, because if he can get Scaramanga dead, I don't know why he just doesn't go up to the back of Scaramanga to shoot him in the back. There seems to be an honour between the two.
Maybe he's got a little golden gun.
But it's just the fact that what made Nick Nack such a great henchman is because he had his own goal that he wanted, and that was to have this whole island, then Bond blows it up at the end.
Do you know, it's funny, like my mum, she's got this, she was forced to see on a date Octopussy when she was dating my dad. She can't be doing with fantasy action movies at all, but when she was dating, she feigned interest. But she now, to wind me up, knowing sort of what a geek I am and how everything's got to be accurate with me, she's like, "Yeah, I went to see Octopussy. That's the one with Grace Jones and the little fella, isn't it?"
Oh
and,
no!
Isn't that the one with the chap with the bowler hat? And it's like, no. And she's got this sort of collective memory, and isn't Britt Eklund in that one? No, and she's got this kind of collective memory of this one James Bond film where everything happens, and I'm like, no, Octopus is not that one.
Oh dear. Anyway, moving on. I actually had two, but for reasons for space, time, etc., I'll just talk about one of them. I will mention the other one. The other one was You Only Live Twice.
Nice one.
Yeah, that was the one that I was going to say. You only live twice. But the one that I prefer is From Russia with Love. Now, it's always been a favourite of mine, and I think it's before James Bond started going over the top, using the over the top gadgets. It was a really good, straightforward thriller. And there was some fantastic pairings in the film with Kerim Bey and James Bond. It was made such a good partnership.
Well, to sort of emphasise like the lasting legacy that movie's had, whenever a new Bond auditions, it's always the same scene about I think my mouse is too big.
Yeah.
That scene is the scene that they had to. So Daniel Craig's done that scene, Pierce Brosnan's done that scene. Yeah. It's on a lot of the DVDs. Sam Neill's done that scene. What's his face? James Brolin, is it?
James Brolin, yeah.
Yeah, on the Octopussy DVD, there's a screen test for him as Bond. So many people have done that scene, and like you say, because like it's so iconic and sort of it is.
I think From Russia with Love, like I say, it was the film that actually first brought James Bond into the public eye. Doctor No wasn't a huge hit at the time when it first came out.
No, it wasn't.
And it was From Russia with Love that actually did that. It actually brought Bond into the mainstream. And it features the first time that it features iconic characters with Rosa Klebb. The first, is it Spectre? Spectre agent. But I also love Daniela Bianchi, who plays Tatiana, even though she didn't voice it. Like many of the early Bond films, it was actually a lady called Barbara Jefford who voiced the character.
Yeah, that's quite.
But she was so beautiful. I mean, even looking back in the 60s, I think a lot of the 60s women were beautiful anyway. Yeah. But you know, she had that look about her that was the first proper Bond girl, even more so than from Dr. No. You know, I just thought that she had everything that a Bond girl should be. Yeah. And it features some of the best fight sequences ever, including that massive fight on the Orient Express that looks real. It's the first time that it looks real in a fight sequence, and I don't think it's been bettered since, until today. Like Daniel Craig fight scenes are that brutal, and I think From Russia with Love was the first time it had a really brutal, you felt for his life fight scene in it.
Well, that was directed by, and this sort of will feed into my favourite James Bond film, because that was directed by Peter Hunt.
Right.
No, sorry, edited. Sorry,
Edited
not directed. It was directed by Terence Young, but it was edited by Peter Hunt, and Peter Hunt sort of pioneered this kind of directing style where I think he took out certain. He's a really kind of clever editor. Like he took out certain frames to make it move faster, and he used like lots of different techniques. Like there's a scene on the DVD, one of the documentaries, where they explain where they had to do a scene with Rosa Klebb at the last minute, and they sort of used a back plate and reverse some footage. Really, just sort of guerrilla filmmaking, and really kind of gets dirty and sort of has this kind of this way of putting together movies, which other more established editors would sort of turn their nose up and be like, "What's he doing here?" And he's just like really kind of industrious with what he does.
I mean, there's parts of the film that I do love. It's a shame that back in the 60s there was a little bit more censorship over certain things. But the character of Rosa Klebb was supposedly gay, which would have been fantastic to have shown in a film today. But back in the 60s, they couldn't really show too much on that. And it was a shame, really, because I think Rosa Klebb is possibly the first gay character to appear in.
Although you do kind of get into the interesting debate of representation there, and does the lesbian community, underrepresented minority, want cheerleader to be fucking Rosa Klebb?
Yeah, but she does touch Tatiana's knee.
Yes,
which is what I would have loved to have done at many points during my youth.
But yeah, it's a really kind of. It's a great thriller even by today's standards. I love the supporting character. Is it Red Grant?
Red Grant was the guy who had the fight scene, but it was Kerim Bey. Was the supporting actor from Istanbul, who was a Turkish guy. And you even felt for him when he got shot as well, and he had to wear the sling, and Sean Connery had to balance the rifle on his shoulder to get the shot. When he was sniping the guy coming out of the sign on the side of the wall. But I mean, what I'll add before we go on any further is, to me, Sean Connery was my favourite Bond. I did enjoy his films, even though I grew up with Roger Moore, and I did enjoy Roger Moore's Bond for the silliness, the junkiness. I think Sean Connery is one of those Bonds that just can't. I don't even think they've beaten today. I think he's one of the best. In the role, and I know, judging by Phil's smirk,
I know how Roger Moore, Sean Connery. I know who he's going to say. And
he only lasted a few films.
No. Are we thinking of the one that did the one or the two?
Well, my favourite James Bond.
Well, we'll go into that in a bit. I mean, we'll talk about that later. We've talked about our favourite films and favourite Bonds, your favourite film, and then we'll go on to your favourite.
Okay. Well. It's it doesn't feature my favourite Bond, but I guess he'd be up there. It's my favourite is On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Right.
I think On Her Majesty's Secret Service is not only a brilliant Bond film, one of the best Bond films. I think it is actually
one of the. Diana Rigg in it.
It's one of the best films ever made. Yes, I said
I love Diana Rigg. Sorry, I'm just butting in on Phil's love of On Her Majesty's Secret Service for my love of Diana Rigg.
Not at all. First of all, like what I really like about the film is what a kind of bruised kind of character Bond is at the start of the film. You see him. It's set up in a way to kind of reintroduce Bond as Bond the character rather than the actor. It's like you see him in silhouette, where he goes to reach for a cigarette and he lights his cigarette, and you've got him. You see his hat and he's driving his car, and it's only sort of when he gets onto the beach that you actually see him in full, and you actually see it's George Lazenby and it's not Sean Connery, and it's a nice sort of way of setting up the character. And also he's a really kind of damaged figure. It's like he's looking for something to kind of reinvigorate him. He's like been he's been on the trail of Spectre, of Blofeld for some time, not had much luck with it, and he's really kind of tired. And he sees, through this relationship with Diana Rigg, with Tracy, he's reinvigorated again. And there's these wonderful lines which I don't think have really been topped. These moments where they're talking, it's like, she's like, you know, you're playing it very risky, and he was like, well, if you want to play it. If you want to stay alive, you play it safe, or whatever. And he's like, well, please stay alive, at least for tonight. And it's just, and it's just sort of, and there's the scene where she's like, supposing I were to kill you for a thrill, I can think of something more sociable to do. And it's just this wonderful sort of sense of like these two broken people are kind of healing each other. And then I think as a thriller, it's one of the more kind of plausible ones. Like basically, like it's not sort of wanting to Blofeld. It's setting up this idea of germ warfare and stuff like that, which is something all too plausible. And Blofeld's aspirations are a little less lofty. Like he wants to be a full recognition of his title as the Count de Blowjob. And then of course
the Count de Blowjob.
Yeah, the Count de Blowjob. A recurring theme of this episode.
It's blowjobs. Well, that's because we've got a big thing.
Yeah, maybe I think we need to put that in the tags of this episode. But yeah, I think, and then of course it ends with this, and there's the wonderful, and also I think Lazenby is an asset to that movie. I couldn't imagine Sean Connery in that. I can't imagine feeling for Sean Connery at the end.
To be fairly honest, I would have to agree with that. Even though I think Sean Connery, to be fairly honest, I think he's better than George Lazenby, but I do have to admit, some of those scenes, Sean Connery's just got something not smarmy about him, but there's no way I could see that emotion that George Lazenby can actually give towards some of those moments within the film that Sean Connery just would not have been able to put across.
Yeah. It's just a pity that George Lazenby, as an actor, really didn't have the presence. I don't think. I don't think he did. See, I enjoyed On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I do like the film for the like you said, the thriller quality, the dramatic quality of the film is absolutely amazing. But I found George Lazenby's Bond was possibly one of the most, needy of the Bonds. It just didn't really fulfil the role in the way that I would have loved to have seen him.
I suppose it's a matter of preference, but I mean, I've never really been a fan of the superhuman Bond, and I think he can really handle himself in the fight scenes. I think there's a really, it's not quite up there. It's not the train scene in From Russia with Love, but it's up there. The scene on the beach at the beginning. And he looks like he can really handle himself in a fight. And apparently George Lazenby broke the stuntman's nose or something in his audition because he didn't know how to stunt fight, so he just, he's this big lanky Australian fella and he just bloody punched him in the nose, and then he threw a shrimp on the Barbie, and then I think, and then also I quite like his vulnerability. Like there's a scene where he's in Pitt's Glory, he's just escaped from the mountain hideaway, and he's being chased, and there's like a moment where like a bear, I think someone in a bear costume comes up to him and goes, "Rawr!" And of course he's on edge because he's been chased by it, and he sort of jumps, and it's like you actually think, God, yes, like he's actually, I believe in this person, I believe this person exists, and I think it sort of lends it all that more poignance, and I believe that he's falling in love with Diana Rigg, and I believe, how heartbroken he is. And I don't think he's, by any means a great actor, but I do think he's kind of got this rough and readiness about him, which which adds something to it. He brings a sort of human quality to Bond, which isn't everybody's cup of tea, and I completely understand why other people. And that's why I quite like those human elements of Bond.
I mean, the bit that I can never quite understand with On Her Majesty's Secret Service is the way that the Bond films were moving at the time. Is they were going into certain territories that they'd started with You Only Live Twice, that sort of humour aspect, but also the size, the epic quality of the Bond films, which suddenly was completely changed in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's kind of like, this is a new Bond guy coming in, so we're going to reinvigorate it. But as soon as Sean Connery come back, it went back to the style that they were aiming to go in, and it was as if it was this weird dogleg in the middle of the Bond franchise.
A lot of that is down to Peter Hunt.
I was going to say, you can look at it from this perspective, right? You've got all the Sean Connerys, and then all of a sudden, basically, he has that change in personality.
Yeah.
So they get George Lazenby in, and then at the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, his wife gets shot, died, and he goes back to being the dick that he is.
Exactly,
so they bring back Sean Connery.
It was just this really weird little pocket that in between two epic-sized films, and I could never quite grasp the producers and or the writers' thoughts on why they put this in at this point, because On Her Majesty's Secret Service really could have been the film that could have been the third one in the franchise after From Russia with Love, and it would have fitted in perfectly there. But then the way that Bond was going after it, after Goldfinger and Thunderball, it really just didn't.
Well, a lot of it was to do with sort of prep time. I mean, there was also this legal battle with Thunderball and the rights.
Yeah, we never say never again as well.
So Thunderball got made because they needed to pounce on an opportunity. They sort of struck a deal with Kevin McClory, and it was sort of like who was the guy who owned the rights. It was like, so he actually gets a co-producer credit on Thunderball. So they sort of needed to jump on that opportunity. We need to make Thunderball now, and it kind of got pushed further and further back in the schedule. And Peter Hunt was promised that he'd done some really good editing work for them. Again, he'd come in on You Only Live Twice when he wasn't supposed to help Lewis Gilbert out with the editing of it, and it was promised as his book. Now, a lot of the book, it's very, very close to the book, and a lot of it is his idea. And I think Connery was quite publicly critical of You Only Live Twice, saying how over the top it had become and how he wasn't playing a character anymore, he was playing a superhero. So as this, I think there was an attempt to sort of go back to basics, and I think if Lazenby had have continued, Peter Hunt might have stayed, and carried on, and it would have been it would have carried on the story.
I mean, the only downside to that is I think James Bond would have lost its popularity
possibly
if George Lazenby had carried on.
Or maybe people would have got used to it, because you've got to remember he was the first actor to have ever taken over that role. So people aren't used to it. So but by the time you get to sort of the third film down the line, would you start to suddenly? It's an interesting question, but would you actually start to kind of recognise him as James Bond, especially since he's done nothing else as well? So it's an interesting question. Yeah. I think one that's never really going to be answered properly. My favourite James Bond, just to add, is Timothy Dalton, for the same reasons. Sort of the humanity, he's the kind of human quality he brings to it.
Even though his first one was actually written for Roger Moore in mind. Yes. it was, yeah, because it was. I know Roger Moore had always talked about leaving, but it's a
very kind of generic Bond.
Yeah, it was, and Roger Moore could very easily have sat in that place. And,
thrown in a few more ad-libs.
It's the only downside to Roger Moore at that point is he was looking very old. Very old. But anyway.
So I think we should talk about our favourite Bond villains.
Ooh. To be honest with you, I haven't really got one. That's really, really tough to say. I haven't got a favourite Bond villain. I just can't think of one particular that stands out to me as being my favourite.
Oh, the only reason
I like a lot.
The only reason why I'm going to say him, and you're probably again going to disagree, but I think it's because technically he's eco-friendly beyond belief. Scaramanga. The whole point was that whole island was all powered by solar energy. Yeah. And you just think to yourself, wow, in the 70s, that's a great idea. And like James Bond says, but you're going to, basically you're going to try and sell it to the oil marketers so that you will actually put it into play so that they can get rich.
Yeah.
But it's I just like the fact that he's just this energy efficient fella. You know, he's done nothing really that bad. He got taken on by the KGB, and then he went. You know, I'm not getting paid that much, so he goes become a privatised assassin
For $1 million, he
Yeah.
shoots somebody. Yeah.
Well, I will say that actually, I do really like Christopher Lee's performance. I've got no problem with Christopher Lee in that movie. He's one of the better things about it, and that's another thing why it frustrates me so much, is because it should give him so much more to work with. He should be in a better film.
Yeah.
And it's the same. Like I'm not really a Star Wars fan, so I can't really contribute. But again, the same thing strikes me with Episode 2. It's like Christopher Lee should give this man better parts to play in better films.
I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, as major characters go, I really don't have a favourite, but I have a couple of like henchman type characters that I do prefer.
Go for it.
Mr. Kid and Mr. Kid and Mr. Win. Diamonds Are Forever. Just the playoff that they had between the two of them, I thought was really funny.
And they've got that creepy John Barry theme tune.
Whenever they come on. You know, I really do like them as henchmen. And Oddjob, I did enjoy the character of Oddjob. The bowler hat being very iconic James Bond. You mentioned the character of Oddjob to any person on the street that has maybe just watched the odd Bond film, they'll know who the character is, they'll know which film he's from. You know, so henchman wise, big major villain wise, I just can't just pull a favourite out of any of them. I like them all.
I think my favourite has got to be Franz Sanchez, and pretty much from License to Kill, pretty much from where he sits in like when the film was made in '89. Like I don't think there'd been a decent sort of really kind of memorable. I mean, obviously there was Jaws, but a properly memorable villain since Scaramanga actually. It's sort of. There's Robert Davi who plays him is just an actor who's having real fun. There's a real sense of menace there. It's like, what did he promise you? He's hot. Give her his hot. And it's just, I want you to know this is nothing personal. It's purely business. And there's just some kind of malevolent, but also you believe him that he could be this drugs baron. And it's refreshing in the 80s and that point in the Bond to find an actor who's just totally gets it and totally strikes the right balance, and he's got some really kind of wicked lines, and I think that was something they kind of lost a little bit during the late 80s Bond. Like in The Living Daylights, it was Brad Whitaker who was an arms dealer and just very bland.
Christopher Walken. In A View to a Kill. It wasn't that. It was what's her name again?
Mayday. Grace Jones.
Yeah, Grace Jones. Jesus Christ, that woman couldn't be any more masculine. You know, if there's one woman I would quite happily have a fight with, it would be her.
She also had a pop career, can you believe it?
Yes.
Jones had a pop career, and it was fucking awful. But she made a great Bond villain.
I quite like her pop stuff, but that's what makes this podcast interesting. Very, very different musical. Talking about music, that's a nice little segue there. Well set up there. I don't know whether that was intentional, but.
Very unintentional.
Yes, it was.
No, take credit for it. You're doing yourself a disservice. So let's talk Bond themes.
The Spy Who Loved Me. It's just something nice and mellow,
which
relaxing.
Does it better.
Yeah, Carly Simon.
Does.
It's just I can lay back, close my eyes, and just listen to that over and over again. It's just something really nice about it.
Yeah. Mine?
Yeah,
Living Let Die. It's got to be Living Let Die.
Living Let Die.
Possibly one of the first rockiest Bond themes. Not a big, huge fan of Paul McCartney and Wings, but I think that one's an iconic song.
That's interesting because it's like, and the whole score to that movie is done by George Martin. And that's
when you were young and
that sort of starts.
Was an open book.
We talked about before about Goldfinger setting up a lot of trends. So does Live and Let Die, because that's the first time that it kind of really moves with sort of contemporary pop stylings.
It does.
Rather than the kind of jazz, easy listening something. And I think there is Shirley Bassey type thing. And I think there is something kind of quintessentially jazz and swing
you
about
look at them all. You've got Matt Monro, Tom Jones.
Yeah.
You know, they're all quite very, you know, for that period of the Bonds, very similar. You know, fair enough, the vocals are different, but in the style of how they go. But I agree, then when you go to Live and Let Die, it brings something new to it.
This is quite a recent thing for me, because I always used to be fond of, because of the poignance and the images it conjured up of We Have All the Time in the World from On Her Majesty's. But actually, it's not really that Bondian. And quite recently, I've listened to it a lot lately, is Thunderball. I think Tom Jones's thing, it's got a lovely kind of theme to it. Do 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 do, and it's kind of weaves in the Bond theme. And he always runs while others walk, and it's sort of describing. So he strikes bum, 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 like Thunderball. It's just sort of really kind of. It describes Bond. It describes the whole world.
See, I always felt that was the easiest of the Bond thing.
And it ends with this killer note at the end where, like thunder. He belts it out, and apparently he made himself pass out in the studio when he recorded.
I would have liked to see that.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to see the veins pop
I'm
out.
not a big Tom Jones fan, but there's just something about it that's very kind of evocative. So we'll move on now.
Bond Girls. We've not mentioned Bond Girls, have we?
Well, I don't know. They've been mentioned in passing. Anyone got anything to contribute about Bond Girls?
Yeah, I really wanted one character to be called
Alright,
Pussy Rider. Yeah, I mean, you had Pussy Galore, you had Honey Rider. Why not Pussy Rider? But I do have some favourite Bond girls though, I must admit. I did like Jane Seymour as Solitaire.
Breckland as Good
Well,
Night.
to be honest with you, she wasn't one of my favourite characters. I just liked the character of Solitaire. And I did like Tatiana, you know, the Daniela from Russia With Love, and also Diana Rigg as Countess Rosie.
Glad no one's mentioned any of the modern ones, like Halle Berry or Denise Richards.
I would have liked Xena on the top on the
Xenia on the top, yeah. And also like
pushing her with her thighs.
Yeah, and also exactly what she was exactly.
Tell me that you love me.
She was exactly what that. She was exactly what that film needed as well. Just because Bond had been away for a while, and it was just like, here we go. Do you remember Bond? Bond's great, isn't it? They have these women, and they're all these weird characters, and here's this cigar-smoking Russian. Yeah, here's Xenia on the top, people. So she was a real kind of good statement of intent for GoldenEye, and just to be able to be like, hello, Bond's back.
Here's one for the GoldenEye with the character again. What was it? Fam Jameson. I know the actress. And all those stunt scenes where Bond is getting a good straddling. You know, you think, you know, good on you, Fam Jameson is straddling. No, it was one of the contestants from Gladiator.
Oh dear.
So we'll sort of move on now and wrap up with like our feelings about the franchise today, like where we feel it is today, and our hopes for Skyfall.
To be fairly honest, going back to Daniel Craig in itself, do you remember who was up against him when they were doing the casting auditions?
Not really.
It was in the papers. Daniel Craig and Clive Owen.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
You know, I honestly, I could never imagine Daniel Craig as Bond. I always thought Clive Owen actually would suit the part and thought it'd be brilliant. When Daniel Craig gets announced, I thought, am I going to like
especially
this?
If you're doing Casino Royale as well, because it's sort of this haggard kind of. Clive Owen looks like the way Bond's described in the book. He really does. It's sort of like a little bit, still handsome, but a little bit haggard and a little bit kind of rough around the edges.
But upon reading the book Casino Royale, I thought it was fantastic. I was looking forward to this, but still, I could not imagine Daniel Craig. So when watching it, I thought, fuck me, he suits the part, he plays the part well. Yeah. And what was great about it is it's not just the fact that they've gone back to the first book itself, but they've kind of revamped it for the new Bond.
Yeah.
And he plays it so well, and it's that nice little starting point, because even though he's different to all the other Bonds, it's seeing him for who he was at the start point. And I thought, this is going to be interesting. Let's see how it comes out. And I thought it was done so well.
And you think about all the bollocks that was in the press about the kind of minutiae of like a blonde Bond, and it's like, in the end, it doesn't matter. It's a good actor.
No, I mean, Sean Connery didn't have dark hair.
Yeah.
You know, his is kind of like a lightish brown colour, so does it really matter what colour the hair of Bond is? I mean...
Yeah, and there's enough, and I know plenty of women who've had on their desktop background Daniel Craig in his trunks, like, because they were trying to say that he was ugly as well and he wasn't handsome enough for Bond, and well, I think he's proved them all wrong in that department. Very much so. Like, he's definitely got a strong female following.
I mean, my hopes for the new film that's coming out. I'm not a huge fan of the Daniel Craig films that much. I did like Casino Royale. Didn't really like Quantum of Solace too much.
I think we can all agree on that one.
I'm just hoping Skyfall is good. That's all I can say about it. I'm just hoping that it brings it back to James Bond being this fantastic action movie, but at the same time of the humour, the iconic characters of M and Q, just everything about it. I just want to bring him back.
I mean, I think the stripped back nature of both Casino Royale and even Quantum of Solace to a degree, I think it needed to happen. I think every now and again Bond just needs to go back to basics. I think there's an abundance of flaws.
There's basics and then just a whole arty action flick. Yeah. You just thought, where's the storyline?
Yeah, but I think it still kind of follows on in a similar vein. And what I'm saying is that hopefully with Skyfall, and it's the 50th anniversary of Bond, they can sort of strike the right balance. But I think it's something that needs to happen with the Bond franchise every now and again.
What I was saying to you guys earlier after watching the trailer again, what was really nice about it was that phrase resurrection.
Yeah.
And after the state of Quantum of Solace, I know you disagree with me on that to a certain extent, but resurrection is what I'm expecting.
Yeah.
From what I saw of the trailer, I saw Bond, I saw, if you look back at some of the old trailers from the 70s, it just made me feel like we were going back to what Bond was about. We had Casino Royale, Startup, Quantum of Solace, I forgot about, and Skyfall, I'm hoping, as they describe in that trailer, a resurrection.
Yes.
Bond comes back. Bond is what we remember.
We like a bit of bondage.
Yeah.
So, I'd just like to... I think, have we said all we want to say about James Bond?
Considering the time that we've got left, I would say yes. Because we could have mentioned our worst ones.
Skyfall is coming out in cinemas October 26th.
Yes, very soon.
So, hopefully I will finally get to see my first Bond in the cinema.
I'd just like to close with, just because I was reading it in my research and I've not really found the appropriate point to insert it, so I'll drop it.
Because it's got nothing better to do in it.
Yeah, this is from one of my favourite moments. This is from the very end of the Casino Royale novel. The telephone rang and Bond snatched up the receiver. He was on to the Link, the outside liaison officer, who was the only man in London he might telephone from abroad. Then only in dire necessity. This is 007 speaking. This is an open line. It's an emergency. Can you hear me? Pass this on at once. 3030 was a double, working for Red Hand. Yes, damn it, I said was. The bitch is dead now.
See, you make a good Jack and Ori reader.
Jack and Ori tells a story.
Well, we'll say goodbye then.
Yes.
I think that would be interesting, just to interrupt, though. Basically, at the end of each episode, we get
Phil
readings with Phil.
And
he just,
it's that Ronnie Corbett moment when he sits in his chair and tells a shit joke.
Some bad impressions, a good story, and hopefully our audience might not have fallen asleep.
Yeah. You guys might know this, but actually the reason I'm doing this is I'm trying to put together a show reel because I'd like to record books on tape. So if anybody's listening and wants to give me a job...
Are you doing Mary Chatterley's Lover? I want to hear you going, ooh, ah.
Seriously, so join us next week where I'll be reading Pride and Prejudice.
So what is
Red Dwarf, I think it's...
Red Dwarf.
Yes,
it's...
We are
very soon, next month,
I'm up for Red Dwarf.
Yeah, Red Dwarf it is then. So, I'm Phil.
I'm Scott.
And I'm still sober.
He's still sober. Live long and talk bollocks.
Oh yes.